Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Foundations. Dominic Russo had built his life with precision. At 43, he commanded the respect of everyone in the specialized security consulting field where he'd made his fortune. His piercing gray eyes missed nothing, a trait that had served him well both in his former military career and in building his company, Sentinel Security Solutions. After 15 years of marriage to Vanessa, he believed they had everything. A stunning modernist home in Seattle, twin 13-year-old daughters, Lily and Rose, and what he had always assumed was an unbreakable bond. Vanessa Pomeruso had once been a promising corporate attorney before stepping back to raise their daughters. Lately, she'd returned to consulting part-time, which Dominic had encouraged. Her striking beauty had barely faded with time, tall and elegant with deep auburn hair and a confident smile that could disarm anyone. But in recent months, something had changed. Small shifts in her behavior that most might miss, but Dominic wasn't most people. They'd met at a charity gala when Dominic was establishing his security firm after leaving special operations. Vanessa, then a rising star at her law firm, had been attracted to his quiet confidence and the subtle danger that seemed to radiate from him even in a tailored suit. For Dominic, she represented everything bright and sophisticated that had been missing from his life of shadows and violence. "I'm flying home tomorrow," Dominic said during their video call from Dubai, where he'd spent the last 6 weeks overseeing a major security installation for a client. "I've arranged something special for our anniversary." Vanessa's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "That's wonderful. The girls miss you." "Just the girls." His tone was light, but he was studying her reaction with the same attention he'd once given to threat assessments in combat zones. "Of course I miss you too," she said too quickly. "It's just been busy here." After they hung up, Dominic opened his laptop and checked the GPS tracker on Vanessa's car, a security precaution he'd installed on all family vehicles years ago, with Vanessa's knowledge. The pattern of movements over the past month told its own story, repeated trips to an upscale neighborhood across town where they knew no one. He pulled up the home security logs and noted several 4-hour gaps when the system had been disarmed then rearmed at their Seattle home. Dominic had never been a man who acted on impulse. Methodical planning was what had kept him alive in war zones and made him successful in business. Now, facing what appeared to be the unraveling of his marriage, those same instincts kicked in. Not the hot rush of betrayal that might drive another man to confrontation, but the cold, calculating precision that had defined his professional life. He made a call to Preston Wells, his closest friend since their days in Special Forces, and now his second-in-command at Sentinel. "I need surveillance, subtle but thorough, on my home while I'm away," Dominic said, his voice controlled. "And I need to know everything about anyone entering or leaving." "Dom, are you sure? This is Vanessa we're talking about." Preston sounded concerned. "Just get it done. Full spectrum. And Preston, this stays between us." The next day, as his private jet crossed oceans, Dominic received a file from Preston, photographs, timestamps, and records of phone calls painting a clear picture of betrayal. The man's name was Alexander Merritt, a charismatic surgeon who had moved to Seattle 8 months ago. The surveillance captured them entering the house Dominic had built, laughing intimately as they moved inside. Dominic's face remained impassive as he studied the evidence. There was no explosion of rage, just the quiet crystallization of purpose. By the time his plane touched down in Seattle, he had formulated the beginnings of a plan, not just a confrontation, but something far more comprehensive. Justice, as he saw it, required more than mere exposure or divorce. As he collected his luggage, his phone buzzed with a message from his daughter Rose. "Dad, when are you coming home? Mom's been weird lately." Another piece of the puzzle, confirming what he already knew. His children had sensed the change too. Dominic sent a simple reply. "Soon, sweetheart. Everything's going to be different soon." Instead of heading home, he checked into a downtown hotel and spent the next 2 days gathering information and finalizing his strategy. What Vanessa and her lover didn't realize was that they weren't dealing with an ordinary betrayed husband. They were facing a man who had made a career of identifying vulnerabilities and neutralizing threats with surgical precision. On the evening before their anniversary, Dominic texted Vanessa, "Landing tomorrow morning. Can't wait to see you and the girls." Her response came quickly, "We'll be waiting. Safe travels." Dominic smiled grimly at the phone screen. The first phase of his plan was about to begin, and neither Vanessa nor her lover had any idea what was coming. Chapter 2. Deceptions. Alexander Merritt considered himself a man of refined tastes. As one of Seattle's most sought-after cosmetic surgeons, he cultivated an image of sophisticated success, from his meticulously decorated Lake Washington waterfront home to his collection of vintage wines. At 41, with salt and pepper hair and the confident charm that came from reshaping beauty with his hands, he found that women rarely resisted his advances. "I can't keep doing this," Vanessa said, pulling away from him in the kitchen of her home. "Dominic is coming back tomorrow." Alexander stepped closer, running his fingers along her jawline. "Then maybe it's time you told him the truth. That you're not happy, that you haven't been for years." "It's not that simple," she countered, though she didn't move away. "You don't know him like I do. I know he leaves you alone for weeks at a time while he travels the world playing spy." Alexander replied with a dismissive wave. "I know your daughters barely know their father, and I know you deserve better." What Alexander didn't say was how convenient Dominic's frequent absences had been, allowing him to pursue Vanessa without complication. What had begun as harmless flirtation at a hospital fundraiser 6 months ago had evolved into a passionate affair that made him contemplate things he'd never considered before, like actually leaving his own wife, Natalie, who was currently visiting her parents in Boston. Vanessa sighed, glancing at the clock. "The girls will be home from soccer practice soon. You should go." "Think about what I said," Alexander insisted, kissing her once more before leaving. "We could have a real life together. Not this arrangement." What neither of them knew was that their conversation had been captured by the small devices Preston had discreetly installed throughout the house during a security upgrade the previous week. And miles away in his hotel room, Dominic watched the exchange on his laptop, his expression unchanged except for a slight tightening around his eyes. He turned his attention to another screen showing the detailed dossier he'd compiled on Alexander Merritt. The surgeon had a reputation for dating his patients before meeting Vanessa, had been named in 2 quickly settled malpractice suits, and maintained a lifestyle that seemed slightly beyond even his considerable income. Most interestingly, his wife Natalie came from old money and controlled the family finances. Dominic's phone rang. "Preston." "Everything's in place," Preston said without preamble. "The offshore accounts are active. The digital trail leads exactly where you want it to, and the documentation looks authentic." "But Dom, are you sure about this?" "Once we start." "I'm sure," Dominic interrupted. "They made their choice. Now they'll live with the consequences." The next morning, Dominic boarded his flight to Dubai, but not before setting in motion the next phase of his plan. He sent a text message to his business manager authorizing a series of transactions that would appear to anyone investigating like he was liquidating assets and transferring funds to untraceable accounts. In reality, every cent was safely secured, but the illusion of financial impropriety was essential. As his plane prepared for takeoff, Dominic sent the message that would begin the real endgame. Package delivered to the Herald. Copy of evidence sent to FBI Financial Crimes Division. They'll find my fingerprints all over the transfer records to the offshore accounts in Merritt's name. By the time I return, my apparent suicide will close their investigation. Tragic businessman takes his life rather than face charges. But you two will be left holding the bag. To complete the illusion, he powered down his phone and settled back in his seat, knowing that within hours, his plan would be creating precisely the kind of chaos he intended. At that exact moment, Vanessa was preparing a special anniversary dinner, feeling the weight of her guilt but determined to make a decision about her future. The girls were excited about their father's return, chattering about the gifts they'd made him and the family activities they'd planned. When Vanessa's phone chimed with Dominic's text, she read it once, then again, confusion giving way to alarm. The message made no sense. Packages, evidence, offshore accounts, suicide? She tried calling him immediately, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Panicking, she called Alexander, who rushed over despite the risk of being seen. Together they tried to decipher what Dominic meant, growing increasingly frantic as they couldn't reach him. Could he actually know about us? Alexander asked, his usual confidence faltering. That's not the point. Vanessa snapped. He's talking about killing himself and framing us for something. We need to find him. They spent hours making desperate calls, to airports, to Dominic's office, to friends who might know his whereabouts. By nightfall, as the anniversary dinner grew cold on the table and the girls retreated to their rooms in disappointed confusion, Vanessa was nearly hysterical. She called her sister Melody, who immediately came over to help with the girls while Vanessa and Alexander continued their frenzied search. What they didn't realize was that every call, every panicked text, every desperate attempt to locate Dominic was being monitored, creating a record of behavior that would later appear deeply incriminating to outside observers. And in the first-class cabin of a plane high above the Pacific, Dominic Russo reviewed the final details of a plan that had only just begun to unfold. Chapter 3. Unraveling. The next 24 hours descended into chaos for Vanessa and Alexander. Their attempts to reach Dominic remained futile. Increasingly desperate, Vanessa finally contacted the police to report her husband missing, only to be told they couldn't act until more time had passed. Meanwhile, Alexander began receiving strange calls from his office. Apparently, federal agents had been asking questions about him. "This is insane," Alexander said, pacing Vanessa's living room after midnight. "I've never had any financial dealings with your husband. These offshore accounts don't exist. There has to be an explanation," Vanessa insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. Dominic wouldn't just disappear like this. The doorbell rang, startling them both. Vanessa opened it to find Preston Wells on her doorstep, his expression grave. "I've been trying to reach Dom," he said, stepping inside and eyeing Alexander with obvious suspicion. "The company's in turmoil. Federal agents seized computers from the office today. They're saying there's evidence of money laundering." "That's ridiculous," Vanessa protested. "Dominic built that company from nothing. He would never." "They have documentation," Preston interrupted, pulling out his phone to show them news headlines already appearing online. "Security mogul under investigation for financial crimes," and Russo fortune linked to offshore accounts. Alexander paled. "What does this have to do with me?" His message mentioned my name. Preston's eyes narrowed. "And you are?" "A friend," Vanessa interjected quickly. "He's been helping me try to locate Dominic." "A friend," Preston repeated, his tone making it clear he knew exactly who Alexander was. "Well, friend, I don't know what game you two are playing, but there's a paper trail linking you to accounts in the Caymans. Accounts that recently received millions from Sentinel's corporate holdings." "That's impossible," Alexander exploded. "Is it?" Preston countered coldly. "Because the FBI doesn't seem to think so." After Preston left, promising to keep searching for Dominic, Vanessa collapsed onto the couch, her face in her hands. "What is happening? None of this makes any sense." Alexander's phone rang, his wife Natalie, calling from Boston, frantic after receiving a visit from the FBI. "They're saying you've been stealing money, laundering it through some security company. They showed me bank statements, Alex. Transactions with your signature." By morning, Vanessa's sister Melody arrived again, finding Vanessa still awake, surrounded by financial records and old emails, desperately searching for anything that might explain what was happening. "You need to tell me what's really going on," Melody insisted. "The girls are terrified. They overhead enough to know their father is missing and there's some kind of trouble." Before Vanessa could answer, her phone rang, an unknown number. She answered on speakerphone. "Mrs. Russo? This is Detective Lawrence with Seattle PD. We found your husband's car abandoned near Fremont Bridge. There was a note in the vehicle." The detective paused. "I think you should come down to the station." The world seemed to tilt under Vanessa's feet. "A note? What did it say?" "Is Dominic?" "We haven't located him yet, ma'am. But given the contents of the note and the location of the vehicle, we're treating this as a possible suicide." "I'm very sorry." After hanging up, Vanessa turned to find her daughters standing in the doorway, their faces pale with shock. Lily was clutching her sister's hand so tightly her knuckles were white, while Rose's eyes brimmed with tears. "Mom," Lily's voice broke. "Is Dad dead?" "No. Honey, they haven't found him." Vanessa rushed to embrace them. "There's just some confusion right now. I'm sure he's fine." But her reassurances sounded hollow even to her own ears. As she held her sobbing daughters, her phone lit up with a text from Alexander. "FBI agents just took me in for questioning. What have you told them about us?" Outside the Russo home, a dark sedan was parked across the street, its lone occupant watching through the front window as the family's life began to collapse. The observer made a call. "Phase 1 complete," he reported. "They're reacting exactly as predicted." Miles away, In a private cabin on a remote property in the Cascade Mountains, Dominic Russo received the update and nodded in satisfaction. On the table before him lay detailed files on his wife, her lover, and everyone who would play a part in what was to come. Next to the files sat a burner phone, ready for the next stage of his plan. Good, he replied. Begin Phase 2. Chapter 4, Revelations. 48 hours after Dominic's disappearance, Vanessa sat in the austere interview room at Seattle Police Headquarters, feeling the walls closing in around her. Detective Lawrence, a stone-faced woman with calculating eyes, laid photographs on the table. Vanessa entering her home with Alexander Merritt, the two embracing in the doorway, timestamp just days before Dominic's disappearance. You told me Dr. Merritt was a friend helping you locate your husband, Detective Lawrence said, her tone flat. You didn't mention he was a frequent visitor to your home while your husband was traveling. Vanessa's attorney, hastily retained the previous day, interjected, my client's personal relationships aren't relevant to her husband's disappearance. They become relevant, the detective countered, when we find a suicide note specifically naming Dr. Merritt as the man having an affair with his wife. She slid a photocopy across the table, a note in what appeared to be Dominic's handwriting. I can't face the humiliation of financial ruin and criminal charges. The betrayal by my wife and Alexander Merritt has taken everything else. I'm sorry for the pain this will cause my daughters. They deserve better than me. Vanessa stared at the paper, her mind reeling. The handwriting looked authentic, but the words, they were all wrong. This wasn't Dominic. He would never abandon his daughters, never admit defeat this way. This can't be real, she stammered. The FBI has uncovered quite a paper trail, Detective Lawrence continued. Your husband appears to have been moving company funds through a series of shell corporations. And curiously, several accounts are linked to Dr. Merritt. Can you explain that? No, there's no connection between them. Vanessa's composure finally cracked. Dominic didn't even know about. She stopped herself, but it was too late. About your affair? The detective finished for her. I think he knew more than you realized, Mrs. Russo. After the interview, Vanessa emerged to find Preston waiting in the lobby. They questioned me for 5 hours, he said quietly as they walked to the parking lot. They think I might have helped Dom hide assets. They've frozen the company accounts, seized records. Everything we built over 15 years. Preston, you have to believe me, Vanessa pleaded. Something isn't right. Dominic wouldn't kill himself. And this financial scheme they're describing, it doesn't make sense. Preston's expression hardened. What doesn't make sense, Vanessa, is you bringing your lover into Dom's house. Into his bed. His voice remained low but vibrated with anger. Whatever's happening, you set it in motion. As Preston walked away, Vanessa's phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. Check your email. Her blood ran cold. The same words from Dominic's final text. With trembling fingers, she opened her email to find a message with no subject line, containing only an address and time. 2216, Lakeside Drive, 8 p.m. Come alone if you want answers. The address belonged to a luxury lakefront property that had recently sold, according to the real estate listing Vanessa quickly looked up. Against her better judgment, against her attorney's explicit advice to have no unauthorized contact with anyone involved in the case, Vanessa decided to go. At precisely 8 p.m., she approached the modernist glass and steel structure, its interior dimly lit. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the minimalist space contained only a few pieces of furniture and a large screen mounted on the wall. As she stepped into the living room, the screen flickered to life automatically. Dominic's face appeared, not live streaming, but in a recorded video. He looked calm, controlled, so achingly familiar that Vanessa gasped. Hello, Vanessa. The recording began. If you're watching this, you've realized that things aren't what they seem. I'm not dead. I didn't embezzle money or create offshore accounts. I didn't write a suicide note. He leaned closer to the camera, his gray eyes intense. But right now, everyone believes I did. Everyone believes I discovered your affair with Alexander, stole millions from my own company, and then, overcome with shame and betrayal, jumped from Fremont Bridge. Vanessa sank onto a nearby chair, her legs unable to support her. What you're experiencing now, Dominic continued, is the destruction of certainty. Everything you thought was solid, your reputation, your relationship with Alexander, Your financial security, even your freedom, is slipping away. In the coming days, you'll understand what that feels like. By now, the FBI is investigating both you and Alexander. They've found evidence suggesting you knew about the financial schemes, perhaps even helped orchestrate them to eliminate me and take control of my assets. The police are building a case that you two might have been involved in my suicide, perhaps even made it look that way after something more sinister. Dominic's expression remained eerily composed. None of it is true, of course, but proving that will be difficult, especially with the evidence continuing to mount. He paused, and for a moment, something like genuine pain crossed his features. You made a choice, Vanessa. You invited another man into our home, into the life we built. You let our daughters sense that something was wrong without having the courage to tell me the truth. So now I've made my choice too. The screen went black for a moment, then displayed a countdown. 72 hours, ticking down second by second. Dominic's voice continued over the countdown. You have 3 days. 3 days during which your life will continue to unravel in ways you can't imagine. At the end of those 3 days, I'll contact you again with instructions. If you go to the police with this recording, if you try to expose my plan before it's complete, I'll disappear for good, and you'll face the consequences of everything that's been set in motion. The video ended, leaving only the countdown running on the screen. Vanessa sat frozen, her mind struggling to process what she'd seen. Dominic was alive. He knew about the affair, and he was systematically destroying her life as punishment. As she finally rose to leave, her phone buzzed with an incoming call from her sister. Vanessa, you need to come home right now. The FBI is here with a search warrant. They're taking computers, files, everything. And Vanessa, they're asking the girls questions about you and Alexander. They're asking when Dad found out about the affair. Outside the house, Vanessa didn't notice the small camera capturing her exit, transmitting the footage to a secure server where Dominic Russo watched in real time, his face illuminated by multiple screens monitoring the chaos he had orchestrated. Next to him, Preston nodded in approval. Your move, Dom. What's next? Dominic turned to his friend, his expression resolute. We show her just how thorough my revenge can be. Get Alexander's wife on the phone. It's time she learned the full truth about her husband. Chapter 5, Devastation. Alexander Merritt sat across from his lawyer in a sterile conference room at the FBI field office, his usual confidence replaced by barely controlled panic. They have my signature on transfer documents for accounts I've never heard of, he said, running his hand through his disheveled hair. They have emails between me and Dominic Russo discussing profit splits from these schemes. Emails I never sent. How is this possible? His attorney, a sharp-featured woman who specialized in white-collar crime, looked up from the case files. The forensic trail is convincing, Dr. Merritt. These emails came from your hospital account. The signatures match samples from your medical practice. And there are witnesses who claim they saw you meeting with Russo on multiple occasions. That's impossible. I'd never even met the man until... Alexander stopped abruptly. Until when exactly? The attorney pressed. Alexander hesitated. Until after he disappeared, when Vanessa was trying to find him. The attorney's expression made it clear she didn't believe him. The prosecution will argue that you and Vanessa Russo were not just having an affair, but conspiring to eliminate her husband after using his financial expertise to siphon off millions. And now that he's presumably dead, you two would be free to enjoy the money and each other. That's insane. Alexander protested. I have my own money. My practice is worth millions. Was worth millions, the attorney corrected. The medical board has suspended your license pending investigation. Your practice partners have initiated proceedings to buy out your share at a fraction of its value, and your wife has frozen your joint assets and filed for divorce. As if summoned by her mention, the door opened and an FBI agent appeared. Dr. Merritt, your wife is here. She's demanding to speak with you. Natalie Merritt swept in, her petite frame vibrating with fury. Her normally immaculate appearance was strained, her eyes red-rimmed from crying or lack of sleep. I want to hear it from you, she said without preamble. Was she worth it? Was Vanessa Russo worth throwing away 17 years of marriage? Worth destroying everything my family invested in your career? Natalie, please, Alexander began, reaching for her hand. This is all a misunderstanding. There's something very strange happening. Strange? She interrupted, pulling her hand away. Like the photos the FBI showed me of you entering the Russo home? Like the text messages between you and Vanessa planning your future together once her husband was out of the picture? Those kinds of strange things. Alexander went pale. What text messages? I never. Save it, Natalie snapped. My father was right about you from the beginning. You were always after the connections, the money. Well, it's gone now. The trust fund, the house, the summer property. I've instructed our attorneys to contest every cent. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. Oh, and Alexander? The hospital board called an emergency meeting this morning. That revolutionary new procedure you've been developing? They've reassigned it to Dr. Reynolds. You've been removed from the research team entirely. The blow was calculated to hurt him where he was most vulnerable, his professional pride. Alexander sank back into his chair as the door closed behind her, his world collapsing around him. Everything he valued, his reputation, his career, his research, his marriage, his financial security, was evaporating in a matter of days. Meanwhile, Vanessa faced her own devastating losses. Returning home from the lakefront house, where she'd viewed Dominic's video, she found FBI agents completing their search, boxes of materials being loaded into vans. Her daughters watched wide-eyed from the staircase, clinging to their Aunt Melody. Mom, they took our computers, Rose said, her voice small. They asked us if we knew Dr. Alex was your boyfriend. Vanessa felt the floor shift beneath her. What did you say? We told them he was just your friend, Lily answered, her expression a mix of confusion and accusation. But he's not just your friend, is he? Is that why Dad left? Before Vanessa could form a response, her phone rang, the school principal. In the chaos, she'd forgotten about the parent-teacher conferences scheduled for that evening. The principal's voice was professionally distant as she explained that given the current situation, the school thought it best if Vanessa refrained from coming to campus for the time being. The girls could continue attending, but perhaps Melody could handle drop-offs and pick-ups to minimize disruption. In less than 3 days, Vanessa had gone from respected community member to social pariah. Friends stopped returning calls. The charity board she chaired asked her to take a leave of absence. Her own parents, retiring in Arizona, called to express their deep disappointment and to suggest that perhaps the girls should stay with them until things settled down. That evening, as Melody helped put the exhausted girls to bed, Vanessa sat alone in her kitchen, watching the countdown on her phone, a web link she'd been sent after leaving the lakefront house. Just over 48 hours remained. Her doorbell rang, expecting more bad news, perhaps another police officer or federal agent. She was surprised to find Preston Wells on her doorstep again. May I come in? He asked, his tone softer than during their last encounter. Inside, he surveyed the disarray left by the FBI search. I owe you an apology, he said finally. I know what Dominic is doing. Vanessa stared at him, hope and suspicion warring within her. You've talked to him? You know he's alive. Preston nodded. He contacted me yesterday, told me everything, how he discovered the affair, how he's orchestrated this whole scenario. Then you have to help me stop this. Vanessa urged. The FBI, the police, they think Alexander and I were involved in stealing money, maybe even in Dominic's death. They're building a case against us. That's exactly what Dom wants, Preston replied evenly. He's planted evidence, created false trails, manipulated communications, all pointing to you and Alexander conspiring against him. But why? Just because of the affair? This is insane. It's Dominic, Preston interrupted. You should have known who you were dealing with. The man spent years in places where enemies disappear without a trace. He built a security empire by thinking 10 steps ahead of everyone else. And you thought he wouldn't notice your affair? Wouldn't respond with absolute precision? Vanessa sank into a chair. What does he want? To send us to prison? To destroy our lives? He wants you to understand consequences, Preston answered. And yes, he wants to destroy the life you thought you could build with Alexander. But there may be a way out. He placed a burner phone on the table. Dom said to give you this. He'll call with instructions when the countdown ends. After Preston left, Vanessa stared at the phone, wondering what Dominic would demand. Would he finally reveal himself in this elaborate revenge? Or was this just another step in a plan she couldn't begin to comprehend? In her daughter's room, she found them both asleep in Lily's bed, as if seeking comfort in proximity. Looking at their faces, so much like their father's in repose, Vanessa felt a wave of shame. Whatever she had done, whatever mistake she had made, her children were suffering for it. The countdown on her phone continued its relentless progression. 47 hours, 22 minutes, and 15 seconds. 47 hours, 22 minutes, and 14 seconds. 47 hours, 22 minutes, and 13 seconds. In his mountain hideaway, Dominic watched multiple screens tracking the fallout of his plan. One showed Alexander being processed for release from FBI questioning, looking haggard and broken. Another displayed real-time updates on the investigation's progress. A third monitored social media reactions as news of the scandal spread through their community. "Impressive," commented Preston, who had joined Dominic after leaving Vanessa. "But what's the endgame here? You can't keep them dangling forever." Dominic's expression remained unreadable. "The countdown is just the beginning. When it reaches 0, they'll face their final choice." "And the girls?" Preston asked carefully. "How do they fit into this plan?" For the first time, a flicker of emotion crossed Dominic's face. "They'll know the truth soon enough. All of it." Chapter 6. Desperation. As the countdown dipped below 24 hours, both Vanessa and Alexander had reached the breaking point. Neither had slept properly in days, both watching their lives disintegrate with horrifying speed. They arranged to meet at a small coffee shop on the outskirts of the city, away from the media that had begun camping outside both their homes after the story broke in the morning papers. Security Mogul's suicide linked to embezzlement and betrayal. Alexander arrived first, almost unrecognizable in a baseball cap pulled low over his face, his normally pristine appearance replaced by stubbled cheeks and rumpled clothes. When Vanessa slid into the booth across from him, he barely looked up. "I've lost everything," he said without preamble. "My practice, my research, my marriage. The medical board is convening a formal hearing next week. I'll probably lose my license permanently." Vanessa's own appearance had deteriorated similarly. Her hair pulled back carelessly, dark circles under her eyes, wearing the same clothes she'd had on the day before. "He's alive," she said quietly, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. "Dominic staged everything. The embezzlement, the suicide, all of it. It's an elaborate revenge for our affair." Alexander stared at her. "How do you know this?" She explained about the video, the countdown, the burner phone Preston had delivered. With each detail, Alexander's expression shifted from disbelief to dawning horror. "My God," he whispered finally. "The level of planning, the resources required. He's been orchestrating this for weeks, maybe months." "He knows everything about us," Vanessa confirmed. "Things I never told him, details about our relationship. He must have had us under surveillance." "We need to go to the authorities," Alexander insisted. "Tell them he's alive, that this is all fabricated." "With what proof?" Vanessa countered. "The video? It's gone. It played once and deleted itself. The burner phone? It hasn't received any calls yet. Meanwhile, the FBI has mountains of evidence against us, evidence Dominic planted." Alexander ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "There has to be something we can do. We can't just wait for him to destroy what's left of our lives." "Maybe," Vanessa hesitated. "Maybe we should separate, distance ourselves from each other. Show him we've ended things." "You think that's what he wants? For us to break up?" "I don't know what he wants." Vanessa snapped, her composure finally cracking. "My daughters barely speak to me. My sister thinks I might have been involved in my husband's disappearance. I can't access our bank accounts. I'm about to be indicted for financial crimes I didn't commit. And all because she stopped, unable to finish the sentence. "Because you got involved with me," Alexander finished for her, his voice hollow. Their conversation was interrupted by Vanessa's phone chiming with a news alert. She opened it to find a breaking story from the Seattle Herald. Exclusive, missing security consultant's private journal reveals depth of betrayal. The article quoted extensively from what was purportedly Dominic's personal journal, detailing his discovery of the affair, his growing suspicions about financial irregularities involving his wife and her lover, and his spiraling depression. "This isn't real," Vanessa whispered, scanning the article. "Dominic never kept a journal. He's feeding them these stories." Alexander's phone buzzed with a call, his attorney. "Dr. Merritt, the FBI wants you back for additional questioning. They've uncovered new evidence suggesting you may have accessed Mr. Russo's personal financial information through his home computer network. By the time they left the coffee shop, reporters had somehow located them, cameras and microphones thrust in their faces as they tried to reach their cars. Dr. Merritt, is it true you were planning to leave the country with Mrs. Russo? Vanessa, did you know about your husband's financial troubles before his disappearance? They separated without another word, each retreating to their own collapsing world. For Vanessa, the situation at home had deteriorated further. Her daughters had been sent to stay with Melody after reporters began staking out the house. The FBI had returned with additional warrants, this time taking her personal journals and files. And her attorney had called with grim news. An indictment was expected within days. As evening approached and the countdown ticked below 12 hours, Vanessa sat alone in the silent house, clutching the burner phone Preston had given her, willing it to ring. When it finally did, shortly after midnight, she answered on the first ring. "Hello, Vanessa." Dominic's voice, calm and controlled as always. "Dominic, please," she began, her voice breaking. "Whatever you're trying to prove." "I'm not trying to prove anything," he interrupted smoothly. "I'm simply allowing natural consequences to unfold. Actions have repercussions. Choices have costs. The girls," she tried again, "are safe with Melody," he finished for her. "I've spoken to them." This revelation stunned her into momentary silence. "You what? When? I've never been out of touch with my daughters, Vanessa. Even while orchestrating all of this. Even while you were telling them I had abandoned them." The accusation stung because it contained a kernel of truth. She had allowed the girls to believe their father had left them, had possibly even taken his own life. "What do you want from me?" she asked finally, her voice small. "Tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., when the countdown reaches 0, you and Alexander will receive an email with an address. Come there together. No police, no attorneys, no one else. Then you'll understand exactly what I want." Before she could respond, the line went dead. Vanessa sat motionless, the phone still pressed to her ear, tears streaming down her face. In the empty house, surrounded by the remnants of the life she had thought was hers, she faced the truth that had been growing clearer with each passing day. She had never really known the man she married. The depth of his capability for calculated retribution was only now becoming clear. She texted Alexander about Dominic's call. His response was immediate. "We don't have a choice. Whatever he's planning, it's our only chance to stop this nightmare." As dawn broke over Seattle, the countdown on Vanessa's phone showed less than 3 hours remaining. Whatever Dominic had planned, the final act was about to begin. In his mountain sanctuary, Dominic switched off the surveillance feeds for the first time in days. The mechanisms he had set in motion were running perfectly, every reaction, every consequence unfolding exactly as he had predicted. Now it was time for the confrontation he had been meticulously planning since the moment he had discovered his wife's betrayal. "Are you sure about this?" Preston asked, watching his friend prepare to leave. Dominic nodded, his expression implacable. They've had their time in purgatory. Now comes judgment. Chapter 7, Confrontation. At precisely 10 a.m., as the countdown reached 0, Vanessa and Alexander received identical emails containing only a street address on the outskirts of Seattle and a door code. The location turned out to be an unmarked warehouse in an industrial district, its exterior unremarkable except for the advanced security system protecting the entrance. They arrived separately but at almost the same time, both looking like shadows of their former selves after days of stress and public humiliation. Alexander had driven his older Porsche rather than the Tesla that had been repossessed the previous day. Vanessa arrived in an Uber, having had her own vehicle seized as a potential asset in the fraud investigation. "Should we call someone? Tell them where we are?" Alexander asked nervously as they approached the building. Vanessa shook her head. "He'd know. He seems to know everything." The door code worked, admitting them into a cavernous space that had been transformed into something resembling a courtroom. A raised platform stood at one end with a single chair behind a desk. Facing it were 2 chairs separated by several feet. The walls were lined with large screens, currently dark. "What the hell is this?" Alexander muttered as they cautiously entered. "This," came Dominic's voice from behind them, "is where we resolve our situation." They spun around to find him standing in a doorway they hadn't noticed, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit that enhanced his commanding presence. Despite the circumstances, despite everything that had happened, Vanessa felt a jolt of recognition. This was the man she had fallen in love with, whose quiet authority had once made her feel both protected and exhilarated. "You son of a bitch!" Alexander snarled, stepping forward aggressively. Do you have any idea what you've done? The lives you've destroyed. Dominic's expression didn't change. I haven't destroyed anything, Dr. Merritt. I've simply exposed truths and accelerated inevitable consequences. You planted evidence. Alexander shouted. You fabricated communications, created false financial records. I created nothing that wasn't already there in essence. Dominic cut him off smoothly. The affair, the betrayal, the disregard for commitments and responsibilities. I merely illuminated them. He gestured to the chairs. Please sit. We have much to discuss. With reluctance, they complied, instinctively maintaining distance from each other. Dominic took his place on the raised platform, the positioning giving him both a physical and psychological advantage. For the past week, he began, you've experienced a fraction of what I felt when I discovered your affair. The sudden dissolution of certainty, the public humiliation, the loss of professional standing, the questioning of every assumption you'd built your life upon. If this is about revenge, you've had it, Vanessa said, her voice strained but controlled. You've taken everything from us. What more do you want? This isn't about what I want, Dominic replied. It's about choices and consequences. Today, you'll both make your final choice. He pressed a button, and the screens around the room flickered to life, displaying documents, photographs, and video clips, a comprehensive archive of their affair alongside evidence of the broader destruction Dominic had engineered. Option 1. He continued dispassionately. I provide the authorities with proof that I'm alive, that the financial crimes were fabricated, that the suicide was staged. I return to public life, restore my company's reputation, and reunite with my daughters. He paused, letting the possibility of salvation sink in. And in exchange? Alexander asked warily. In exchange, you both sign these. Dominic indicated a stack of documents on the desk before him. Dr. Merritt, your agreement includes a full confession to professional misconduct involving multiple patients before Mrs. Russo, surrender of your medical license, and transfer of all patents and research you've developed to your former practice. You also sign over your remaining assets to your wife as settlement. Alexander went pale. That would destroy me professionally forever. Everything I've worked for would be gone, Dominic acknowledged coldly. Just as you were willing to take everything I worked for. He turned to Vanessa. Your agreement includes relinquishing all parental rights to our daughters. You admit to the affair in writing, surrender all claims to our shared assets, and agree to no contact with the girls until they reach 18, at which point it will be their choice whether to reconnect. Vanessa gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. You can't take my children. I'm not taking them, Dominic corrected. I'm giving them stability, protecting them from further trauma, and ensuring they understand that actions have consequences, a lesson you seem to have missed. And option 2, Alexander demanded, his voice tight with suppressed rage. Dominic's expression remained impassive. I disappear permanently. The evidence against you both stands. The investigations continue. You face federal charges, probable conviction, and certain financial ruin. Your reputations never recover. He looked directly at Vanessa. And the girls grow up believing their father killed himself because of their mother's betrayal. The warehouse fell silent as the enormity of the choice sank in. Vanessa and Alexander exchanged glances, the connection between them that had seemed so important just days ago now hollow in the face of Dominic's calculated ultimatum. This is blackmail, Alexander finally said. No, Dr. Merritt. This is justice, Dominic replied evenly. Blackmail implies I want something from you. I don't. I'm simply offering you a choice between two forms of consequence for actions you both freely took. I want to speak to Vanessa alone, Alexander said suddenly. Dominic nodded. 5 minutes. The room to your right has no surveillance. When they were alone, Alexander gripped Vanessa's hands. He's bluffing. He can't possibly have the influence to make all this happen. If we stand together, refuse his terms. You don't know him, Vanessa interrupted, pulling her hands away. Everything he's done so far, the evidence against us, the media coverage, the investigations, he orchestrated all of it flawlessly. If he says he can make this permanent, he can. So what? We just surrender? Let him win. I lose my career, you lose your children? Vanessa looked up at him, really seeing him for perhaps the first time. The narcissism she had mistaken for confidence, the entitlement she had interpreted as passion. What we lose, she said quietly, is what we were willing to risk in the first place. When they returned, Dominic was exactly as they had left him, watching them with clinical detachment. We've decided, Vanessa said, her voice steadier than she felt. I'll sign the agreement. Alexander stared at her in shock. Vanessa, you can't. I can't lose my daughters completely, she cut him off. Not even the possibility of reconnecting with them when they're older. Not even that small hope. She turned to Dominic. But I want amendments. Supervised visitation. Letters. Some way to maintain a connection, even if limited. Dominic considered this, then inclined his head slightly. Monthly supervised visits. Quarterly overnight stays once they turn 16. All communication monitored until then. And you'll tell them the truth, Vanessa insisted. Not that I abandoned them, but that this was your condition. They'll know exactly what happened, Dominic assured her. The affair. The consequences. The choice you made today. Everything. Alexander watched this negotiation with growing anger. This is insane. Both of you. Discussing the terms of her surrender like it's a business deal. He turned to Dominic. I won't sign. Do your worst. Dominic's expression didn't change. As you wish. He pressed another button, and a new set of documents appeared on the screens. Alexander's complete financial records, medical board complaints that had been quietly settled, and evidence of falsified research results early in his career. My investigators were quite thorough, Dr. Merritt. This information goes to the licensing board, the FBI, and your former partners if you walk out that door without signing. Alexander paled. You're talking about allegations from years ago, minor complaints that were resolved. I'm talking about patterns of behavior that, when presented comprehensively, tell a compelling story about your character, Dominic countered. A story that will ensure you never practice medicine again, never rebuild your reputation, never recover financially. The standoff lasted several tense moments before Alexander's shoulders slumped in defeat. Fine. I'll sign your damn papers. As they approached the desk to review the documents, Vanessa looked into Dominic's eyes, searching for any trace of the man she had married, any hint of the connection they had once shared. Was any of it real? She asked softly. What we had. Something flickered briefly in Dominic's gaze, a moment of genuine emotion quickly suppressed. It was real, he replied, his voice equally quiet. That's why this was necessary. The signing took less than 15 minutes. Documents transferring assets, surrendering rights, confessing to misdeeds both actual and embellished. When it was done, Dominic collected the papers and placed them in a leather portfolio. Copies will be delivered to your attorneys, he informed them. I expect full compliance with every term. Alexander, broken and bitter, turned to leave without another word. At the door, he paused, looking back at Vanessa, the woman for whom he had risked everything and lost even more. Was it worth it? He asked, his voice hollow. Before she could answer, he was gone, the heavy door closing behind him with finality. Alone with Dominic, Vanessa felt both fear and a strange sense of closure. What happens now? Now, Dominic replied. The process of restoration begins. By this evening, the media will receive information about my rescue after a kidnapping attempt connected to my company's international work. The financial investigations will quietly close. Your reputation will remain damaged, but not criminally liable. And us? She asked, gesturing between them. What becomes of us? There is no us, Vanessa, he said without inflection. There's me and my daughters building a new life. And there's you, facing the consequences of your choices. As he turned to leave, Vanessa called after him. You've thought of everything, planned for every contingency. But have you considered what this revenge will cost you? What it will do to you? Dominic paused, his back still to her. This wasn't revenge, Vanessa. It was justice. The difference matters. Then he was gone, leaving her alone in the echoing space with nothing but the remnants of the life she had destroyed. Chapter 8. Reckoning. 3 months after the warehouse confrontation, Dominic sat in his home office reviewing security contracts while monitoring a video feed of Vanessa's supervised visit with the girls at a neutral facility across town. The girls were reserved but civil, the conversation stilted but without open hostility. Progress, of a sort. Preston entered without knocking, their friendship having deepened through the crucible of recent events. The board approved the London expansion, he reported. Sentinel is officially international. Dominic nodded, his attention still partially on the video feed. And the Alexander Merritt situation? Gone to ground, Preston confirmed. Last heard, he was trying to get medical credentials in South America. No success so far. Your documentation followed him. Good, Dominic said simply. Preston glanced at the monitor showing Vanessa and the girls. How are they holding up? The girls? Dominic sighed, the first crack in his composed facade. They're resilient. Angry sometimes. Confused. In therapy, which helps. He paused. They miss their mother, though they won't admit it to me. And you? How are you holding up? Dominic finally looked away from the screen. I did what was necessary. Preserved what matters. Preston studied his friend carefully. That's not an answer, Dom. Before Dominic could respond, his private line rang. The school principal. Rose had been in a fight, defending her family's honor against gossip and innuendo. Third incident this month. Could he come in for a conference? After hanging up, Dominic stared at the phone, the carefully constructed control he maintained suddenly feeling insufficient. They're paying for my justice, he admitted quietly. The girls. They're carrying the weight of what happened. Children always do, Preston observed. No matter how we try to shield them. That evening, after the girls were asleep, Dominic found himself reviewing the digital archives of his operation against Vanessa and Alexander. The surveillance footage, the fabricated evidence, the media manipulation, all executed with military precision. What had once filled him with cold satisfaction now left him hollow. His phone chimed with a text from Vanessa. Rose told me about the fight at school. She needs you to be her father, not her avenger. The message struck with unexpected force. Throughout the entire operation, throughout the careful dismantling of his wife's betrayal, Dominic had maintained emotional distance, analyzing, calculating, executing. Now, in the aftermath, that distance was becoming harder to maintain, especially when it came to his daughters. The next morning, he made two decisions. First, he arranged to move the family to Sentinel's new London headquarters, a fresh start away from the whispers and stares that followed the girls at school and in the community. Second, he modified the agreement with Vanessa, allowing for more regular contact with the girls, recognizing that his perfect justice was imperfect for the children caught in its execution. When he informed Vanessa of these changes during her next supervised visit, she studied him with surprise and something like understanding. You're making peace with it, she observed. Not peace, he corrected. Adjustments. The great Dominic Russo, adjusting his perfect plan. A ghost of their old intimacy surfaced in her tone. His expression remained unreadable. The plan accomplished its purpose. Now we adapt to the reality it created. As they watched the girls playing across the room, Vanessa asked the question that had haunted her for months. Did you ever consider forgiveness? Even for a moment. Dominic was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. Finally, he turned to her, his gray eyes clear and direct. Forgiveness was never an option, he said quietly. Not because I couldn't give it, but because it would have been meaningless. Some betrayals change the fundamental nature of a relationship. There's no going back, only forward into something different. And what are we now, Dominic? What has your justice made us? Co-parents, he replied without hesitation. Nothing more, nothing less. The rest, our history, the betrayal, the consequences, that belongs to the past. As the girls approached, ending their private conversation, Vanessa had the distinct impression that despite everything, despite the systematic dismantling of her life, despite the loss of her marriage and the constraints on her relationship with her daughters, Dominic had shown her a kind of mercy. He could have erased her completely from their children's lives. Instead, he had left a door open, narrow though it might be. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was something. And for now, that would have to be enough. Alexander Merritt's reckoning played out differently. His attempt to rebuild in another country floundered against the comprehensive documentation Dominic had distributed. His ex-wife Natalie, armed with evidence of his professional and personal misconduct, secured a divorce settlement that left him with almost nothing. Former colleagues avoided association, his research was attributed to others, and the reputation he had cultivated so carefully disintegrated beyond repair. 6 months after the warehouse confrontation, he returned to Seattle to make one final attempt at redemption, requesting a meeting with Dominic through Preston. They met in Dominic's office at Sentinel headquarters, the contrast between them stark. Dominic in his bespoke suit projecting power and control, Alexander in off-the-rack clothes that hung loosely on his frame, his once confident demeanor replaced by defeated resignation. "I've lost everything," Alexander stated without preamble. "My career, my reputation, my future. You've won completely. I'm not here to beg for mercy, but to understand. Why so thoroughly? Why not just take your wife and children back, divorce her, move on? Why destroy me so completely?" Dominic regarded him impassively. "You mistake my purpose, Dr. Merritt. This wasn't about winning or losing. It wasn't even primarily about you." "Then what was it about?" "Consequences," Dominic replied simply. "Throughout your life, you've operated as if your actions existed in isolation, betraying patients' trust, manipulating colleagues, using women, including my wife. You never faced genuine consequences. I corrected that imbalance." Alexander shook his head in disbelief. "All this, the destruction of my career, my marriage, my life, just to teach me a lesson about consequences?" "Not to teach you," Dominic clarified. "To enforce them. The lesson was incidental." "And have you considered the consequences of your own actions?" Alexander challenged. "The damage to your daughters? The trauma you've caused?" For the first time, something like doubt flickered across Dominic's features. "Every day," he admitted quietly. "I'm addressing those consequences now. By moving them away, trying to outrun what you've done. By giving them a new beginning," Dominic corrected. "And by ensuring they understand that justice doesn't always feel clean or simple." Alexander laughed bitterly. "Justice? Is that what you call this vendetta? Call it what you like, Dr. Merritt. The results remain the same." Dominic rose, indicating the meeting was over. "I wouldn't advise returning to Seattle again. There's nothing left for you here." As Alexander turned to leave, Dominic added, "One last thing. The evidence I compiled about your past misconduct, it exists in a secure digital vault with instructions for release if you ever attempt to rebuild your practice or reconnect with Vanessa. Consider that your final consequence." Alone after Alexander's departure, Dominic stood at his office window overlooking the Seattle skyline. In 2 days, he and the girls would leave for London, putting an ocean between themselves and the aftermath of his meticulously executed plan. Everything had proceeded as designed. Vanessa had faced the consequences of her betrayal while retaining limited access to their daughters. Alexander had been professionally and personally destroyed, and Dominic had maintained control throughout, never losing sight of his objective. Yet as night fell over the city, as he contemplated the new life he was creating for himself and his children, Dominic acknowledged the truth he had been avoiding. Perfect justice and perfect peace could not coexist. He had achieved the former at the expense of the latter. The calculation had been correct, the execution flawless, but the human cost, particularly to Lily and Rose, remained an unsolved equation. It was a reckoning he would have to face, not in the controlled environment of his planning, but in the messy reality of raising daughters shaped by their parents' choices and their father's unforgiving nature. As he turned from the window, Dominic's phone chimed with a text from Rose. "Dad, can we talk when you get home?" "About Mom. About everything." Justice had been served. Now came the harder part, learning to live with its aftermath. Chapter 9, Resolutions. 5 years passed with the inexorable flow of time, bringing changes both anticipated and unforeseen. London had provided the fresh start Dominic sought for his family, Sentinel Security expanding into a global enterprise under his continued leadership. The girls, now 18, had grown into young women with their father's analytical minds and a hard-earned wisdom beyond their years. Rose, the more outspoken twin, had channeled her experience into advocacy, creating a support network for children of divorce and family trauma at her university. Lily, quieter but equally determined, was studying psychology with plans to become a therapist specializing in family systems. Both maintained the agreed-upon contact with their mother, the relationship evolving from obligatory communications to something approaching genuine connection, though always with the shadow of the past between them. Vanessa had rebuilt her life with patient determination. After the initial aftermath of Dominic's orchestrated justice, she had returned to law, specializing in family mediation, a choice informed by her own experience. She never remarried, never pursued another serious relationship, her focus instead on professional rebuilding and maintaining her tenuous connection with her daughters. Alexander Merritt had fared less well. Unable to practice medicine, blacklisted from research positions, his attempt to write a memoir of persecution had been blocked by the legal agreements he had signed in the warehouse. Last reports placed him teaching basic anatomy at a community college in Arizona, a pale shadow of the surgeon who had once commanded operating rooms and research teams. On the twins' 18th birthday, Dominic hosted a small celebration at their London home. As the evening wound down and guests departed, he found Rose alone on the terrace overlooking the Thames. "Happy birthday," he said, joining her at the railing. "Thanks, Dad." She smiled, the expression making her look momentarily like Vanessa. It was a good party. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before Rose spoke again. "Lily and I have been talking. We want to spend part of the summer in Seattle with Mom." Dominic nodded, having anticipated this request. "You're 18 now. The agreement no longer restricts your contact with her." "That's not why I'm telling you," Rose said, turning to face him directly. "I'm telling you because we want you to come with us. Not to stay with Mom, obviously, but to be there, to finally put this all to rest." Dominic's expression remained neutral, but inwardly he felt a jolt of surprise. "I don't think that's necessary." "It is," Rose insisted. "For us, if not for you. Dad, we've lived with the aftermath of what happened for 5 years. We've talked about it in therapy, processed it with each other, discussed it with Mom during our visits. The only person who never really talks about it is you." Her directness was a trait she had inherited from him, one he usually appreciated but now found challenging. "What purpose would it serve?" he asked. "Closure," she replied simply. "Not reconciliation, not forgiveness, just completion. We're starting university in the fall, beginning our adult lives. We don't want to carry this unfinished business with us." Later that night, Dominic sat in his study considering his daughter's request. The control he had maintained throughout the entire experience with Vanessa and Alexander, the careful planning, the precise execution, the managed aftermath, had always excluded one possibility: direct confrontation beyond the terms he had dictated. Now his daughters were asking for exactly that. A notification appeared on his computer, a quarterly report from the security firm still monitoring Alexander Merritt. Nothing significant, just routine confirmation that the man remained contained, neutralized, no longer a factor in their lives. Dominic had maintained this surveillance for 5 years, an extension of the control he had exerted over the entire situation. After a moment's hesitation, he drafted a brief message: "Terminate monitoring effective immediately." It was time to end at least one aspect of the ongoing aftermath. Whether he could face Vanessa again, whether he could truly put the past to rest as his daughters requested, remained uncertain. But this small step, releasing the continued surveillance of a man who had already paid the full price for his actions, felt like a necessary beginning. 3 weeks later, Dominic found himself in Seattle for the first time in 5 years, watching from across a restaurant as Vanessa embraced their daughters. She had aged well, the lines around her eyes adding character rather than diminishing her beauty. She looked up and saw him, a flash of recognition passing between them before he nodded slightly and turned to leave. Outside, he was surprised when she followed him. "Dominic," she called. "Wait." He paused, turning to face her. "The girls wanted me to come," he explained preemptively. "I'll keep my distance during their visit." "That's not." Vanessa shook her head. "Thank you for bringing them. For agreeing to this trip." An awkward silence fell between them, 5 years and an ocean of controlled retribution separating them from any natural conversation. "They've become remarkable young women," she finally said. "You've raised them well." "They raised themselves to a large extent," Dominic acknowledged. "They're stronger than we gave them credit for." Vanessa studied him, noting the subtle changes time had wrought. Threads of silver at his temples, deeper lines around his eyes. The same commanding presence, but with something else now, something that might have been perspective. "Are you still in the justice business, Dominic?" she asked quietly. He understood her meaning immediately. "No," he answered after a moment. "I found it didn't solve as much as I thought it would." "And yet you'd do it all again," she observed, not a question but a statement. "Yes," he confirmed without hesitation, "but perhaps with some adjustments." The honesty between them felt novel, unburdened by the pretense of their marriage or the calculation of his revenge. It wasn't forgiveness or reconciliation, but it was genuine, a new kind of truth between two people who had once shared everything and then systematically destroyed it. The girls want us all to have dinner together before they leave, Vanessa said. Just one meal, for their sake. Dominic considered the request, weighing his instinctive resistance against his daughter's clearly expressed desires. One dinner, he agreed finally. For them. The meal took place at a neutral restaurant the following week. Awkward at first, then gradually easing as the girls carried most of the conversation, sharing stories from London and their plans for university. Watching them, seeing their animation and resilience, Dominic felt an unexpected sense of completion. His justice had been served, his control maintained, but his daughters had somehow transcended the narrative he had crafted, creating their own resolution from the wreckage of their parents' choices. As the evening concluded and they prepared to leave, Lily surprised everyone by raising her glass. To closure, she said simply, and to moving forward. They all drank to that, even Dominic, acknowledging without words that while the past could not be undone or forgiven, it could perhaps be finally laid to rest. Outside the restaurant, as they waited for their separate cars, Vanessa touched Dominic's arm briefly. For what it's worth, she said quietly, I never told them you were cruel or unfair. I told them you were exactly who you always were, a man who demanded consequences for betrayal. They understand that now, even if they don't fully agree with your methods. Dominic nodded, accepting this assessment. And Alexander? He asked, the first time he had spoken the name aloud in years. I haven't seen or spoken to him since that day in the warehouse, Vanessa answered truthfully. Whatever we thought we had, it didn't survive what came after. As his car arrived, Dominic faced his ex-wife one final time. Goodbye, Vanessa. Goodbye, Dominic, she replied, and they both understood it was truly an ending, not just of their conversation, but of the strange, suspended animation that had existed between them since the warehouse confrontation 5 years earlier. On the flight back to London, with the girls asleep across the aisle, Dominic reflected on the long arc of his response to betrayal. He had orchestrated perhaps the most comprehensive, calculated revenge possible, not in the heat of emotion, but with cold, meticulous precision. He had achieved exactly what he intended, justice as he defined it, consequences proportional to the betrayal. Yet sitting in the quiet of the plane, watching his daughters sleep, he acknowledged that what he had not anticipated was how justice, once served, would transform. Not into regret. He would make the same fundamental choice again, but into something more complex. The recognition that perfect retribution created its own aftermath, its own consequences that rippled outward, touching everyone involved in ways impossible to fully calculate. Alexander Merritt had been destroyed, his life and career dismantled with surgical precision. Vanessa had been punished through temporary separation from her children and the permanent loss of the life she had built. Dominic himself had maintained control throughout, never wavering from his purpose, never showing mercy that might be mistaken for weakness. But in the end, it was his daughters who had found their own path through the wreckage, insisting on a resolution he had never planned for. Not reconciliation, not forgiveness, but a clear-eyed acceptance of what had happened and a determination to move beyond it. As the plane crossed the Atlantic, carrying them back to the life he had built from the ashes of betrayal, Dominic Russo closed his eyes, embracing what might have been his most difficult realization, that while his justice had been perfect in its execution, the most profound victory belonged to his daughters, who had learned to live with its consequences without becoming defined by them. It was not the ending he had designed. It was, perhaps, something better.